My sister-in-law kicked me from Thanksgiving for being an HVAC tech, then found out I pay her student loans. If you think family betrayal can't be measured in dollars and degrees, you haven't met my sister. I'm about to tell you the true story of the Thanksgiving I was exiled from my own family's table and the secret I've been keeping for a decade that shattered my sister's perfect world when it finally came out. If you're new here and stories about real family drama, hidden sacrifices, and ultimate reckonings pull you in, make sure you hit subscribe. I share these truths so we don't feel so alone in our own messy families. My name is Mara Thorne. I'm 42 years old, and this isn't a fictional tale. This is my life, a chapter I lived through, and I'm sharing it with you directly, right here, right now. This all started, as so many family explosions do, with a holiday that was supposed to be about gratitude. It really began with a phone call, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. My phone buzzed on the workbench, vibrating next to a schematic for a geothermal loop system I was designing. I wiped my greasy hands on my coveralls and answered. It was my sister, Elise. "Mara, we need to talk about Thanksgiving," she said, her voice that particular blend of strained sweetness and unspoken agenda I'd come to know too well. "Okay," I said, leaning against the van with our company logo, Thorne Climate Solutions, etched on the side. "What's up? I was planning to bring the pies, like always." "Yes, about that." She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words like she was selecting fine china. "This year is different. James, that's my new fiancé, you remember James, his parents are flying in from Connecticut. They're very established. His father is a cardiothoracic surgeon, and his mother is on the board of the Museum of Modern Art. This dinner is important." "Sounds fancy," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I'll make sure my pie crusts are extra flaky." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mara, listen, James's family, they move in certain circles. They're going to ask what everyone does. About your occupation." A cold trickle started in my chest. "My occupation is running a successful HVAC and climate engineering company, Elise. I'm not ashamed of it." "No one's saying you should be," she said too quickly. "It's just the terminology. HVAC took has a certain connotation. It sounds so manual. Could you maybe just say you're in climate systems management or environmental engineering? It's not a lie, it just frames it better." I closed my eyes. The noise of the warehouse bay around me, the hum of compressors, the hiss of a pressure test, seemed to fade. "You want me to reframe my life's work so it sounds more impressive to your future in-laws?" "I want you to help me," she said, her voice tightening. "This is a big moment for me, for us. He's my future. I need this to go smoothly. Please, just wear something nice. That black dress from Mom's funeral. And maybe don't mention the hands-on part. Just talk about the business side if they ask." I felt the weight of every year between us in that moment. "Fine, Elise. Whatever makes you comfortable." "Thank you," she breathed out, a sigh of pure relief. "You're the best. Oh, and could you come early? Like 3 hours early? I'll need help setting up and getting the turkey in. You're so much better at the practical stuff." I agreed. Of course, I agreed. That was my role. The practical one. The one who fixed things, who showed up early, who handled the messy, tangible realities so Elise could focus on the presentation. The morning of Thanksgiving, I was in my warehouse office by 5 a.m., finalizing payroll for my 27 employees. My foreman Leo poked his head in. "Headed to the Sister Palace?" he asked, a knowing look in his eyes.
Leo had been with me since I bought my first service truck. He'd met Elise once. Yep, playing the role of the respectable, vaguely defined business owner, I said, shutting down my computer. He shook his head. She ever gonna see what you built, boss? I mean, really see it? She sees a repair van, I said softly, pulling on my wool coat over the simple, elegant black dress I'd worn exactly once before. She doesn't see the $250,000 commercial contracts. She just sees the grease under my nails. Her loss, he grumbled. Drive safe.
Elise's home in the upscale Brookhaven neighborhood was a monument to curated success. A modern farmhouse with perfect gray siding, black shutters, and a pristine lawn that looked vacuumed. My dusty SUV looked like an invader in her polished stone driveway. I let myself in with the key she'd given me for emergencies. The house smelled of fresh pine and anxiety. "Elise, it's me." She emerged from the living room, a vision in a cream cashmere sweater and tailored pants. Her eyes scanned me, from my sensible low heels to the simple silver necklace at my throat. A flicker of approval. "You look nice. Thank you for coming early. The turkey is intimidating." The instructions said giblet pouch, and I nearly fainted. I smiled, slipping off my coat. "I got it. You go do the tablescape." For the next 3 hours, I was a ghost in her kitchen. I seasoned, I basted, I orchestrated the symphony of sides. I moved through the space with a quiet efficiency that left her free to flutter around, arranging flowers, polishing already gleaming silverware, and nervously rearranging place cards. At one point, I saw her take a small framed photo from the built-in shelves in the dining room, a picture of the two of us, aged maybe 10 and 8, covered in mud after building a fort in the woods behind our old house. She looked at it for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then slid it into a drawer. My heart clenched, but I said nothing. I just stirred the gravy. The guests began to arrive at precisely 4 p.m. James's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Aldridge, were exactly as described, impeccably dressed with polite, assessing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. James himself was a pleasant, handsome man who seemed genuinely fond of Elise, though he shook my hand with a faintly puzzled air as if trying to place me in a category. Then came Elise's other guests, a couple who were fellow junior partners at her prestigious corporate law firm, Simon and Greta, and their unbearably pretentious friend, a venture capitalist named David. Cocktail hour was a masterclass in subtle hierarchy. I was handed a glass of wine and then gently steered to the periphery of the great room, near the fireplace, but outside the core conversational circle. Elise's laughter was a bright, high-pitched bell I barely recognized. She talked about appellate court rulings and market volatility. She did not talk about the mud fort. It was Simon, the lawyer, who first drifted over to me, his curiosity apparently piqued by the quiet woman in the black dress. "So, Elise, tells us you're in climate systems?" he asked, sipping his bourbon. "That's right," I said, using her approved phrasing. "Fascinating sector, very of the moment. Are you with a large firm?" "I own a small company, Thorn Climate Solutions." "Ah, a founder. Impressive. Consulting, mostly?" Before I could answer, Elise materialized at his elbow, a plate of canapés in her hand like a shield. "Mara handles all sorts of things. Very hands-on. She's always been the fixer in the family." She said fixer the way one might say chimney sweep, a necessary, somewhat grubby profession. Simon's interest visibly cooled. "Oh, right on," he said, nodding. "Practical skills. Wonderful." He took a canapé and drifted back toward the center of the room, toward the conversation about stock portfolios. Elise turned to me, the smile dropping from her face. "See, that was fine.
Just keep it vague. I was keeping it vague, I said, my voice low. Good. Let's keep it that way. She patted my arm, a gesture that felt condescending, and floated back to Dr. Aldridge's side. Dinner was a study in tension. I was seated at the far end of the long walnut table, next to Greta, who spent the meal complaining about the difficulties of finding a reliable nanny. I ate my perfect turkey and my flawless mashed potatoes, and I listened. I listened to James's father hold forth on medical malpractice insurance. I listened to David, the venture capitalist, talk about disrupting the sustainable energy space with an app that seemed to involve absolutely no understanding of actual energy systems. And then, as the pecan pie was being served, David turned his attention down the table to me. So, Mara, climate solutions. You know, my fund is looking at a startup that's doing AI-driven efficiency optimization for big box stores. You probably install the units those systems monitor, right? Every eye on the table turned to me. Elise's were wide with a silent plea. I set my fork down. I said, "We do install systems. We also design, engineer, and service them for residential, commercial, and industrial clients."
Right, David said, waving a hand. The boots on the ground crew. Vital work. My uncle was a welder. Solid man. The condescension was so thick you could spread it on toast. I felt a heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't anger at him. He was just a clueless snob. It was the look on Elise's face. Not empathy, not solidarity, just pure, unadulterated embarrassment that I was being addressed at all. Dr. Aldridge cleared his throat. It must be a physically demanding job. Do you have many employees? He asked it like he was inquiring about a stable of workhorses. 27, I said. And yes, it can be demanding. This past quarter, we managed the full environmental system retrofit for the new Brookside Medical Center wing. There was a brief, startled silence. Brookside was a major hospital, a huge project. Elise let out a light, tinkling laugh. Mara's company was part of that project, yes. Such a big team effort. She was minimizing me, right in front of them, slicing my accomplishment down to a sliver. David smirked. Nice. Getting a subcontract on a job like that is a real win for a small shop. That was the moment the last thread of my patience, stretched thin over a lifetime, finally snapped. I looked directly at my sister, who was staring at her plate, her face pale. Elise, I said, my voice calm and clear in the quiet room. Do you remember the Thanksgiving when we were kids and the furnace broke? Dad was working a double and it was freezing. She looked up, confused and alarmed by the change in subject. Vaguely. I remember. You were crying because you were cold. Mom was panicking, so I went down to the basement with a flashlight and Dad's old toolbox. I'd watched him 100 times. I found the faulty igniter, figured out how to bypass it temporarily to get the heat running. Mom called me her hero. I took a sip of water. That's when I knew what I wanted to do. Not just fix things, but build systems that keep families safe and warm. That's not vital work in a condescending way, David. That's essential. And it's not a small shop, it's my life's work. And it paid for this very dinner. The air left the room. James's mother's fork clinked against her plate. Elise's face was a mask of horror. Mara, what are you talking about? She hissed. I reached for my purse, which I had kept at my feet. All eyes were on me. I pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was thick.
I'm talking about the Thorne Family Educational Trust, the one that's been paying your law school tuition, your bar exam fees, your rent on this beautiful house, and the lease on your Lexus for the past 7 years. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush dining rug. Elise stared at the envelope as if it were a live snake. That's Dad's old investment account, the one that matured. Dad died with $18,000 in credit card debt, Elise. There was no investment account. There was just me, and a promise I made to him. James was looking back and forth between us, utterly lost. Elise? What is she saying? Elise couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her perfect, polished world was cracking open right along the seams she had tried so hard to hide. I stood up, my chair scraping softly on the rug. I reached for my purse, which I had kept at my feet. All eyes were on me. I pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was thick. I'm talking about the Thorne Family Educational Trust, the one that's been paying your law school tuition, your bar exam fees, your rent on this beautiful house, and the lease on your Lexus for the past 7 years. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush dining rug. Elise stared at the envelope as if it were a live snake. That's Dad's old investment account, the one that matured. Dad died with $18,000 in credit card debt, Elise. There was no investment account. There was just me, and a promise I made to him. James was looking back and forth between us, utterly lost. Elise? What is she saying? Elise couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her perfect, polished world was cracking open right along the seams she had tried so hard to hide. I stood up, my chair scraping softly on the rug. I reached for my purse, which I had kept at my feet. All eyes were on me. I pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was thick. The trust disperses its final payment next month for your outstanding balance at Yale Law. I looked at the stunned faces of the Aldridges, at Simon and Greta's avid curiosity, at David's shocked stare. I think I've overstayed my welcome. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I didn't run. I walked calmly to the foyer, took my coat from the hook, and let myself out into the crisp autumn evening. As I closed the door behind me, I heard the first sounds of the eruption inside. Raised voices, a sharp cry that might have been Elise's, the chaotic scraping of chairs. I got into my SUV, my hands steady on the wheel. The secret was out. The foundation of her carefully constructed life was built on my sweat, my sacrifice, my dirty blue-collar hands, and she had just kicked the architect out into the cold. But as I drove away, my heart wasn't pounding with triumph. It ached with a deep, old sorrow, because the real story, the one that led to that envelope on the table, was 10 years long. And it began the night our father died, with a whisper in a sterile hospital room and a promise that cost me everything. The drive home from Elise's that Thanksgiving night was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The silence in my car was a physical thing, heavy and complete, broken only by the rhythmic thump of tires on pavement. My mind wasn't racing with what I'd just done. It was still, frozen in the absolute clarity that comes after a detonation. I had lit the fuse 7 years ago, and I just finally heard the blast. I didn't go home. My empty apartment, with its neat, functional furniture and view of the industrial park where my warehouse stood, felt like a stranger's space.
I drove instead to the one place that had always been mine, the Thorn Climate Solutions headquarters. It was a large, unassuming steel building on the edge of town, flanked by our fleet of service vans. At night, with the bay doors closed and the office dark, it looked like what the world probably thought it was, a simple repair shop. I used my key, the motion light flicking on to illuminate the logo I'd designed myself, a stylized oak tree merging with a schematic of ductwork. Inside, the familiar smells of metal, refrigerant, and fresh coffee grounds welcomed me. I walked past the silent workbenches, past the parts inventory, and into my glass-walled office overlooking the main bay. I didn't turn on the bright fluorescents. I just sat in my worn desk chair in the dark and let the reality settle over me. The phone in my purse buzzed. Once, twice, a third time. I didn't need to look to know it was Elise. Then it started ringing. I watched the screen illuminate the inside of my bag with a cold blue light. Elise, home. It rang until it went to voicemail. A minute later, it started again. James, mobile. I finally picked up on the fifth call. It wasn't Elise or James. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Mara Thorne, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Miss Thorne, this is Robert Aldridge, James's father. His tone was calm, measured, the voice of a man used to delivering difficult news without inflection. Do you, Dr. Aldridge? What transpired tonight was deeply unsettling. For my family, and clearly for yours. James is extremely distressed. Elise is... He paused, searching for a clinical term. In a state of significant emotional dysregulation. I almost laughed. Emotional dysregulation. That was one way to put it. I'm sure she is. Her financial security just walked out the door. A beat of silence. He wasn't used to such bluntness. The claims you made, regarding this trust, I need to understand if they are factual. For James's sake. They are 100% factual, I said. Leaning back, staring at the shadowy outlines of the massive air handler units stored in the bay, the Thorne Family Educational Trust. Account number ending in 4481. Administered by me. 7 years of disbursements to Yale Law School, to her landlord, to Lexus Financial. You can have your lawyer call my lawyer in the morning. I'll have the records ready. You're very prepared, he observed. A hint of something. Respect? Suspicion? In his voice. I'm a business owner, doctor. I track every penny, especially the pennies that leave my account to fund a life that looks down on where they came from. He cleared his throat. Elise is insisting you've had some kind of psychotic break, that you've invented this narrative to sabotage her engagement. That stung, but it didn't surprise me. Let me guess, I said softly. She's telling you I've always been jealous of her, that I resented her going to law school while I just fixed furnaces, that this is a long-con revenge fantasy. His silence was confirmation enough. Ask her for her bank statements, Dr. Aldridge, the ones from the last 7 years. Look for the monthly deposits from Thorne Fiduciary. Ask Yale for the payment history on her student account. The truth isn't a narrative, it's a paper trail. And it leads right back to this repair shop you all seem so politely bored by tonight. I see, he said quietly. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Elise's rising in a frantic pitch. This complicates matters considerably. For you, maybe. For me, it's finally simple. I hung up. The phone immediately buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. I took a deep breath and answered. Mara Lynn Thorne, what in God's name have you done? Her voice wasn't angry. It was shattered.
Hello to you too, Mom. Elise called me sobbing. She says you made a horrible scene, told terrible lies in front of James's family. Something about you paying for everything? Mara, what is going on?
I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course, Elise had led with the scene, the lies, not the truth. Mom, listen to me. They aren't lies. After Dad died, Elise was about to drop out of her first year at Yale. She had no way to pay. The loans she'd been counting on fell through. Do you remember? A shaky breath on the other end. I remember she was frantic, but she said she'd gotten the last-minute scholarship. A private benefactor. The private benefactor was me, Mom. I sold my car. I emptied my 401k. I worked 3 jobs for 2 years straight. The HVAC work during the day, a night shift at a packaging plant, and weekend boiler inspections at the old chemical facility. I started this company with that money, and every single profit for the first 4 years went into a trust for her. Every tuition payment, every book fee, her rent when she moved out of the dorms, the security deposit on that fancy apartment, the down payment on her Lexus, it was all me. The silence from my mother was so profound I thought the call had dropped. Mom? A choked sob came through the line. I remember she was frantic, but she said she'd gotten the last-minute scholarship. A private benefactor. The private benefactor was me, Mom. I sold my car. I emptied my 401k. I worked 3 jobs for 2 years straight. The HVAC work during the day, a night shift at a packaging plant, and weekend boiler inspections at the old chemical facility. I started this company with that money, and every single profit for the first 4 years went into a trust for her. Every tuition payment, every book fee, her rent when she moved out of the dorms, the security deposit on that fancy apartment, the down payment on her Lexus, it was all me. The silence from my mother was so profound I thought the call had dropped. Mom? A choked sob came through the line. All these years, you never said a word. She never said a word. She let everyone believe she'd done it all on her own. That was the point, I said, my own throat tight. She wanted to believe it herself, and I let her, because Dad asked me to take care of her. Your father, Mom's voice broke. He would never have wanted this. He would never have wanted you to be her secret servant. He would have wanted sisters. He died asking me to protect her, Mom, and I did. I protected her from debt, from hardship, from ever having to struggle. And in return, she's been ashamed of me, ashamed of him, ashamed of the very work that paid for her polished life. Tonight, she asked me to lie about what I do. She hid a picture of us because I looked too messy in it. She treated me like the help in front of those people. The words poured out now, hot and painful. The promise to Dad had an expiration date, and it expired tonight when she told me I didn't belong at her table. My mother cried quietly for a minute. I let her. Where are you? She finally asked. At the shop. Are you okay? It was the first time anyone had asked me that in a very, very long time. I will be, I whispered. I'm coming up. Tomorrow. I need to see you. And I need to have words with your sister. Don't come into the middle of a war, Mom. It's not a war, honey. It's a reckoning. And I'm her mother, too. I should have seen this. I should have seen how far she drifted. She sighed, a world-weary sound. Get some rest, Mara. I love you. The call ended. The silence of the warehouse felt different now. Less empty. Acknowledged. I powered up my desktop computer. The glow of the monitor was the only light in the room. I pulled up the trust documents, the bank transfer histories, the scanned copies of tuition receipts. I compiled them into a single massive PDF. Then I drafted an email. To Robert Aldridge, James Aldridge. CC, Elise Thorne. Subject, documentation, Thorne's Family Educational Trust. Attached, please find substantiating documentation for the disbursements referenced this evening.
Included are 1. Trust agreement and authorization documents. 2. 7-year ledger of monthly transfers from my personal and business accounts to the trust. 3. Corresponding disbursements from the trust to Yale University, the Berkshire Luxury Apartments, and Lexus Financial. 4. A final notice of trust termination effective today, November 23rd. The final scheduled disbursement for her outstanding Yale balance will not be made. The trust is dissolved. Sincerely, Mara Thorne, owner and principal engineer, Thorne Climate Solutions. I hovered my cursor over the send button. This wasn't just an email. This was a torpedo aimed directly at the hull of Elise's life. I thought of the little girl in the mud fort. I thought of my father's clammy hand in mine. Then I thought of the dismissive smile on Elise's face as she called me the fixer. I clicked send. The action was like pulling a drain plug, a sudden, almost dizzying sense of release. It was done. The secret was not just spoken in anger. It was documented, formalized, and sent into the world. My personal phone started buzzing again, incessantly. But my business line, which was also on my desk, rang. The caller ID showed Brookside Medical Center Facilities Management. It was after 11 p.m.
Professional instinct took over. I answered. Mara Thorne? Mara, it's Ben from Brookside. Sorry for the late call. We've got a critical issue in the new wing. The ICU environmental system is showing a massive pressure drop. The backup's online, but it's unstable. Your team did the install. Can you get someone here now? This was it. This was my reality. While my personal life imploded, the world still needed its heat, its cooling, its oxygen flowing to hospital ICU units. I'll be there myself in 20 minutes, Ben. Don't touch anything, keep the backup running, and evacuate any non-critical patients from the adjacent rooms as a precaution. I grabbed my heavy-duty tool belt and my engineering tablet from their hook. I changed out of the black dress in the small bathroom into the company coveralls that hung in my office. I traded the low heels for steel-toed boots. The transformation was complete. This was who I was, not the embarrassed sister in the corner, the person you call when everything is breaking down. As I drove through the empty streets toward the glowing complex of the hospital, my personal phone finally went silent. Then a single text came through. It wasn't from Elise or James or my mother. It was from Leo, my foreman. Heard what went down. The crew's with you, boss. Whatever you need. I looked at the text, then at the sprawling hospital ahead of me, its windows lit like a beacon in the night. In one world, I had just destroyed my sister. In this world, I was headed to a hospital to keep people alive. The weight of one began to lift, replaced by the clear, urgent weight of the other. The fallout with my family would be a long, ugly storm, but right now, I had a job to do. And for the first time in a long time, I was doing it with absolutely nothing left to hide. The next 72 hours were a blur of concrete, conduit, and consequences. The crisis at Brookside Medical Center lasted until dawn. It wasn't a simple fix. A faulty valve in the oxygen-enriched air supply line for the new ICU was threatening to fail completely. It was the kind of flaw that could have been catastrophic, the kind that gets buried in reports and lawsuits. For 10 straight hours, I was in the mechanical room, covered in a fine metallic dust, my hands working alongside my lead technician, Javier. There was no room for ego, no space for the personal earthquake still rumbling in my life. There was only pressure gauges, solder, and the relentless focus required to keep a system breathing for people who couldn't breathe on their own. We fixed it. As the sun came up, painting the hospital roof in cold pinks and oranges, Ben from facilities gripped my shoulder, his face pale with spent adrenaline. You just saved us from a nightmare, Mara. I don't even want to think about the liability. Just make sure the quarterly maintenance schedule is locked in, I said, my voice hoarse. My body ached, but my mind was painfully clear. This was my domain. Here, I was not an embarrassment. I was the solution. I drove back to the warehouse as the world woke up for Black Friday. My phone, silenced in my tool bag, now glowed with a harvest of notifications. Dozens of missed calls. A scroll of text messages that grew increasingly desperate in tone. The email I'd sent had landed like a bomb. The most recent text was from my mother, sent an hour earlier. At your apartment. You're not here. Where are you? Are you safe? I typed back, grits of solder under my fingernails. At the shop. Just finished an emergency job at Brookside. I'm fine. Be there in 30. When I pulled in, her sedan was next to my empty parking spot. She was sitting on the concrete step by the employee entrance, a thermos in her hands. Seeing her there in her practical winter coat, her face lined with worry and lack of sleep, undid something tight in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed my mom until I saw her waiting for me. She stood up as I got out of the van. She didn't say a word. She just walked over and wrapped her arms around me, coveralls, hospital grime and all. I buried my face in her shoulder for a single, shaky moment, let myself be held. You smell like a machine shop, she murmured into my hair. That's because I am a machine shop, I mumbled back. She pulled back, holding my face in her hands, her eyes searching mine. My brave, stubborn girl, carrying all that alone. Why, Mara? Why didn't you tell me? We went inside to my office. I made coffee in the small pot. The morning light streamed in, exposing the dust on every surface. You had just lost Dad, I said finally, handing her a mug. You were devastated. And you were so proud of Elise for getting into Yale. How could I take that from you? How could I tell you it was all about to collapse? Dad's last words to me were, take care of your sister. It felt like my burden to carry. Mine alone. Tears tracked through the powder-fine dust on her cheeks. He didn't mean for you to be her bank account. He meant for you to love her, to be her sister. I tried, I said, the words cracking. But the money became the only language she understood, and the more I gave, the smaller I became in her eyes. I funded her escape from our world, Mom, and she escaped from me too. My mother set her mug down with a decisive clink. I've spoken to her, at length. Her mouth was a thin, firm line. She is struggling. The Aldridges are re-evaluating. James is apparently processing. She's been frantically calling loan offices trying to find a way to cover the Yale payment. She's realizing for the first time what things actually cost. There was no pleasure in hearing this, only a deep, weary sadness. What did you say to her?
I told her the truth I'd been blind to. That her father was a brilliant mechanic who could have run a company like yours if life had given him the chance. That her sister is a genius with systems, a builder, a creator, not just a fixer. And that her ingratitude is a stain on his memory and a betrayal of your heart. Mom's voice was steel. I also told her not to call you, that until she can look at her life and see your fingerprints on every good thing in it, she has nothing to say to you that you need to hear. I was stunned. My mother had always been the peacemaker, the soft touch. Mom. No, she said, holding up a hand. I failed you both. I let her ambition become arrogance. I let your strength become invisibility. That ends now. She reached into her large purse and pulled out a small, familiar photo frame. It was the picture of us as kids in the mud. She placed it gently on my desk, facing my chair. This belongs here, in the office of the woman who built something from nothing. I couldn't speak. I just put my hand over hers. My moment of peace was shattered by the roar of an engine and the screech of tires pulling into the lot. Through the glass, I saw Elise's white Lexus SUV jerk to a stop. She got out, slamming the door. She wasn't dressed in cashmere today. She wore yoga pants and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was raw, her eyes swollen. She stormed past the parked vans and started banging on the bay door. "Mara, I know you're in there. Open this door. We need to talk now." My mother stood up. "I'll handle this." "No," I said, standing too. A cold calm settled over me. "This is my company, my territory. I'll handle it." I walked out of the office, through the silent bay, and unlocked the personnel door next to the large rolling door. I stepped outside into the crisp morning. Elise spun to face me, her chest heaving. "You ruined everything," she screamed, the sound echoing off the steel building. "Everything. James's parents think I'm a liar and a fraud. James won't even look at me. My partnership review is in January, and now this scandal is all anyone will talk about. How could you do that to me?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I didn't say anything. I just let her rage echo into the empty lot. "You were supposed to just help in the kitchen and be quiet," she raged on, tears of fury now. "That's all you had to do. Why did you have to make it about you? Why did you have to drag up all that ancient history?" "Ancient history?" I repeated, my voice quiet but carrying. "The trust payment for your spring semester was scheduled for December 5th, Elise. That's 2 weeks from now. Where's the history? It's your present. It's your entire foundation." She faltered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "You can't just stop it. You can't. I'll be dropped from my classes. The degree, I won't graduate." "Then I suggest you call Yale's financial aid office this morning. Explain the situation, see what options you have. That's what people do when their funding falls through." "You are my funding." "Not anymore." The finality of the words seemed to physically strike her. She staggered back a step. "You're really doing this? After everything? After all I've accomplished?" "What have you accomplished, Elise?" I asked, the question slicing through the air. "You got into a great school, you studied hard, you landed a good job, but you did it on a full-ride scholarship from me. You live in an apartment I secured. You drive a car I leased. Where exactly in that list is the part you did completely on your own? The part that gives you the right to be ashamed of the hand that wrote every check?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The anger was draining, replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. "You think I'm blue-collar?" I continued, stepping forward. "You're right. My hands are dirty. They're calloused. They've been in furnace flues and hospital air ducts, and with these hands, I built a company that employs 27 people. I won the contract for Brookside Medical's new wing. Last night, with these hands, I kept an ICU's life support system from failing. I held them up, palms out, stained with yesterday's work. What have your hands built, besides a facade?" It was the cruelest thing I'd ever said to her, and it was nothing but the truth. She began to cry in earnest now, not angry tears, but deep, ragged sobs of shame. I didn't know. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I agreed softly. "You just took. And you looked down for 7 years. My mother appeared in the doorway behind me, a silent witness. Elise saw her, and her face crumpled further. "Mom!" "Don't mom me," my mother said, her voice thick but firm. "Your sister has given you her youth, her sweat, her safety, and you treated her like a secret. You have a debt far greater than any student loan, Elise, and it's not to a bank, it's to your family." Elise wrapped her arms around herself, shrinking in the vast industrial lot. She looked small, lost. The powerful attorney was gone,
leaving behind the scared girl who was about to lose everything. "What do I do?" she whispered, the question aimed at the ground. "You grow up. You get a real loan. You pay your own rent. You live in the world you were so desperate to join without my subsidy. And maybe, if you're lucky, you learn what real work looks like and what real family means." I turned to go back inside. This conversation was over. "Mara, wait!" Her voice was small. The trust, the final payment, is there any way?" I stopped but didn't turn around. The old instinct, the promise to Dad, twinged inside me, but it was a ghost. "No, Elise, the trust is dissolved. The last payment won't be made. You're on your own." I walked back into the warehouse, my mother following. I closed the door on the sound of my sister's quiet weeping. The sound followed me, a haunting echo as I returned to my desk. My mother stayed for the day. She helped me clean the office, not saying much, just being a steady presence. In the afternoon, my business line rang again. It was Dr. Aldridge. "Miss Thorne, we've reviewed the documents. They are conclusive. James has asked for some time apart from Elise. He is, understandably, reevaluating the relationship based on this profound lack of transparency. I'm sorry for his pain," I said, meaning it. James seemed like a decent man caught in a crossfire he never saw coming. "He asked me to convey something else," Dr. Aldridge continued. "He said to tell you that what you've built from the ground up is remarkable, and that his parents' condescension last night was unacceptable." He cleared his throat. "On a professional note, the board at Brookside is incredibly impressed with your handling of the crisis last night. Ben Singh couldn't stop praising your expertise. We have holdings in several commercial properties. I'd like our facilities director to contact you about a consultation." The world was so bitterly, ironically funny. In destroying my sister's standing with this man, I had somehow gained his professional respect. "I can have him call my office manager, Lydia. I'll make sure she prioritizes it." As dusk fell, my mother left with one more long hug. "You're going to be okay," she said, as if willing it to be true. I know. And for the first time, I believed it. I was alone again, but the aloneness felt different. It wasn't the loneliness of carrying a secret. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the storm has passed. The smoke was still clearing, the damage was vast, but the war was over. I looked at the picture of two muddy girls on my desk. I traced the frame with a still grimy finger. That little girl in the overalls, the one not afraid of the dark basement, she had grown up. She had built something, and she had finally, painfully learned that you cannot fix a person who doesn't believe they're broken. The fallout was just beginning, but I was no longer hiding in the kitchen. I was standing in the open, in the place I built, ready to face whatever came next.